In this presentation, we will have a look at how you go about creating groups and classifications in the EasyFs financial statements. But let us first get an understanding of the grouping and classification structure. Grouping starts at the highest level and then is progressively broken down into lower levels. The lower levels are linked to their respective higher levels. The linking of the higher level enables the groups to be filtered, the automatic grouping of accounts to higher levels, the automatic correction of any incorrect higher level grouping. Each of the higher levels represents a total on the financial statement and a lower level an item on the financial statements. The high level groups enable the creation of control totals that check that the lower level items have been included on the financial statements. The highest to lowest grouping moves from left to right in the system. The system has a maximum of 10 levels. If you look at it graphically, you can see that it forms a tree structure. The highest level will not be linked to any other group, whereas each of the lower levels will progressively be linked to the group immediately above it. Let's have a look at how this is implemented in the EasyFs financial software. Alright, now I've just opened up a financial statement to try and demonstrate the structure on how the groups are set up and how they work within this EasyFs financial statement. So all of the grouping is handled in the tab called account grouping. So I'll go into that tab, and the structure itself is set up in the group form or group form 1. Personally, my preference is to set up the grouping in group form 1, group form rather, and group form 1 is actually more useful when it comes to actually grouping your accounts into the groups. So setting up the structure is much more clearer when you try and do it in group form. So I'll get into group form first. So this is the form which you will see in group form, and I'll now just close this and open group form 1, and the form which you just seen is actually contained here. So it is a smaller version of that form. It even has the same controls, but it has other features like your trial balance and how much what accounts have been classified into any particular group. As you can see, nothing has been classified at this stage as a trial balance has just been imported. So my personal preference is to use the other form, just a group form rather than group form 1, because you can see the details a bit more clearer and it just focuses on the groups, and therefore as you're setting up the groups, that may be a good place to set them up. Having said that, if you're, for example, let me just filter this down to in revenue. I'm going to filter this down to the revenue types. As you can see, these are the revenue types. So for example, if while you are doing your classification of accounts, if you need to add one more group to it, this may be the best place to do it. You don't need to get out into the group form and create it there and then come back again. You can just create it here. But if you're trying to do an overall structure and develop your own chart of groupings from scratch, maybe you would want to use the other form, as it only focuses on that area, and you can complete it there and then come here and then look at grouping your individual accounts. Now I'm just going to go back into the first form which I showed you, which is group form. So this is the area where you would create the groups. As you can see, I got some groups here in group 1, and the detail of this is contained in group 2. Now as mentioned previously, the grouping moves from left to right, so moving from 1 onwards, so that it assists with the filtering. And when it comes to doing your grouping of your accounts, or classification of your accounts, it becomes much more easier, and sort of it maintains a flow with regard to that. So I'll just demonstrate what I mean by that. For example, if you look at revenue, that's in group 1. If I filter revenue, as you can see, it automatically moves to group 2, and it shows you all the revenue items. Now if I want to filter, say, revenue from sales to another level to see if there's any more. Now one thing which you can also see with these filters, as you can see, some are shaded in blue and some in gray. If it is shaded in blue, it means that there is a further breakdown of that particular group. So I can go into this group, for example. As you can see, there is you can enter up to another 5 levels of breakdown of just revenue from sales. So that's how it works, and that's at the level number 3. So that's how the filters work, and becomes pretty useful when you are actually trying to group your accounts, as it saves a lot of time and narrows down your search as to which group you need to allocate your accounts to. Okay, the initial group does not have any links to any other grouping, because that's the highest level. As you move down progressively, you'll notice that it is linked to the level below. The initial group ideally is on the should be on the left, and it moves towards the right. Now at group 8, I have another initial group. This is for the cash flows, and so you could have another initial group in between at a different level, and then drill down further to the right. So as you go down, as you can see, it's linked to it has been linked to the previous level. So that's how the group structure works. Now how do you go about, for example, creating an item and adding an item into the group? Now for example, if I'm looking at for example, if I'm looking at current assets, I'm going to filter that. Now we have all of these current assets. So if I'm, say, for example, I'm going to look at cash and cash equivalents. I'm going to just set the filter so that I can see which one's filtered. This function, if you noticed previously, one of the items were grayed out. That is because I had not set the filter shading. So if you click on this, it sort of sets it, and then you can just continue from there onwards, and that indicates whether there is a further breakdown. So for example, cash equivalent, I'm going to filter it further. So this has 3 groups, so you can break it into cash on hand, cash and bank, and you have short-term bank deposits. So for example, you wanted to add one more group to this in order to break it down a little bit further. For example, I want to add, say, term deposits. Say for example, and a short-term deposits might cover that, but suppose you want to add term deposits. So you can type in the group. Say I'm going to call it term deposits. Now each of the levels or each of the groups requires a unique code, and it needs to be linked. Now if you filter it, what it does is it will use the lowest level as the group it's going to be linked to, which is correct, and it will attempt to give a unique code based on what has been typed in here, and also the descriptions here. So I'm just going to let it do its automatic creation of those by just clicking out of it. As you can see, it called it cash, so it has used cash, and it's sort of abbreviated this and given it a term there. So you could use automatic codes here which are generated from the system, but sometimes you preparing your own code, sometimes you can make it a bit more meaningful to you as an individual, so that you understand what those groups are. So it's as simple as that, as entering or creating a new group, and then you can utilize this if you needed to create if you needed to classify any accounts to that group. Now I'm going to also try and explain some of the other criteria. For example, I'm going to go back to group 1. I'm going to select revenue, and I'm going to say view subgroups. So what this button does is it opens up a screen which shows you the relationship of the revenue to its detailed items. So if I open this like this, as you can see, revenue has got a number of accounts which you could use. That's the level just immediately below this, and revenue from sales has 4 categories. Now the green highlights that it has further breakdowns. If it's white, it doesn't have further breakdown. If you need, you can add them. So as you click between these, you can see each one what their further breakdowns are. So as you can see, alright. Likewise, if I want to change it to say expenses, get back to that screen. These are all the expense items which are there under statements. Only 2 of them, from what I can see here, has further breakdown. Yes, so for example, if I go to administration contains the auditor remuneration, and then that's linked to a further breakdown of auditor remuneration groups, which you can classify your accounts to, or even split your accounts and then break them into the relevant disclosures that are required. Other expenses has 10 additional other expenses, so you can rename these as you need. Not on this screen, but here you can rename them, and depending on the name you enter here, it will not automatically update on these statements. So that's what this form is for. So basically it's a view so that you can gain an understanding of how it's grouped. Right, so that's what that item does. Now what does this link to do? Now with the link to, what it is now I did demonstrate to you how the system would automatically link if it is filtered. Now for example, as this is not filtered, it will not attempt to put a link to group. So I'm just going to filter this down to say, for example, revenue, maybe revenue from sales. Right, so suppose you didn't have a link to group here, and you needed to link it. So what you could do is, now I'm just going to take this one off, and what you'll notice is as soon as you take out the group, it will disappear from this filter, because it's no longer grouped and part of that revenue from sales. So I'm just going to click it out, as you can see, it's gone. So if you would need to actually find it again in that group, it's still in the group, but it's not filtered and part of this revenue from sales. So you need to clear all of these groupings, and as you can see, it's here. So it never actually vanished, it was actually here, but it's not actually having a group relationship to the level below it. Now it needs to be revenue from sales. So now, as we know, we could either type it and it'll be fine. It's pretty difficult to try and locate it from here. Not that it's difficult, it's just that something you will not be doing. So in that instance, you could use this link to form, and then that'll help you to drill it down to where you need to. For example, revenue, we're looking for group 2, revenue from sales. I mean, my error. Oh, it's there, so I can find this. But if not, if it is easy, if it's difficult, you just try and filter it, for example, like that. Right. So once you've selected it, now this indicator has been selected. You can apply it by double clicking here, and as soon as you double click it, it'll apply the code from here. Alright, so now it has got relinked. So if you go back and say, for example, revenue from sales, you see it has reappeared there because we have actually given it the linked code. Okay, so that's what this item is. Now recalculate group totals. Now, as I'll demonstrate in my next video, when it comes to actually classifying your accounts, you can do bulk classifications from this area, from this form in here. So as soon as you do the bulk classification, it does not attempt to try and recalculate the totals all the time, and there may be instances you would wish to just recalculate it to double check that the figures that are appearing here are consistent with what has been grouped. The recalculation is always performed before the final statements are prepared, so you do not need to be concerned about whether it has actually taken that into account. It will always take it into account in the final statements when it's been generated. But if you need to view it in this form, and if you believe that there may be an error in what's being disclosed, for example, you just hit recalculate and it will recalculate the balances. Alright, now the set filter shading, I think I just explained it. That basically will let you know if there is, it shades it in blue if there is a further breakdown. So for example, here you can see a further breakdowns. So these all have further breakdowns. If I go back, so if you need to just go back, it'll just take out the earlier filter, and as you can see, the shading is fine. So if I hit you can see the shading has been adjusted. Okay, so that's what that function does. This is basically to clear off any filters. And if you have created your groups, you can always export your groups to Excel. This feature is handy because you can have a look at your groups and have it at hand if you need to. It is just something that you might just do, but I don't see a huge use for it. But the function is there if you needed to get your groups out, maybe to communicate it to somebody else who does not have the software as to what these groups are and how it works. So you could use this. So that's the functionality of creating account grouping in EasyFs. One more function I want to just demonstrate is the remove dormant groups. Now I think we just went ahead and we just did a group here for current assets and the cash. We added this term deposit. Now I know that I just added this and it is not being utilized or used on any statement because I just added it. I have not put it onto the statement. So the remove dormant group, actually what it does is it will remove anything that is in the grouping that is actually not being used by the system to produce any financial statements at the time it is run. Now why would this be useful? Okay, I will just first run it and show you what it'll do. So basically what it's expected to do is to take out this one which I just created because it's not on any statements, whereas the others have been included on statements and they are there in the system. So I'm going to hit remove dormant. As you can see, it has taken the group out of this list because it is not needed by the system as the system stands. Now why would you actually need a function like this? Why would you need a function like this is, for example, you are using a template, you uploaded the template, and for example there's a couple of notes which are not relevant for the entity you're producing the financial statements for, so you'd go and you delete those statements. Now just because you delete the statements, it doesn't take out the grouping, because the grouping is still held there until you let it know that it's no longer needed. So when you hit the remove dormant groups, what it'll do is it'll take those groups out, and That's what this function is for. This function is actually very handy, especially since we tend to use it a library where we can bring statements in or bring statements in or add statements to the library. You could end up with groups which are unnecessary, and the risk of having unnecessary groups is that you end up classifying items to that group. One, you're wasting your time classifying it to a group that's not being used, and two, you could put it to a group that's not being used and then have to sort of identify it and then move it out of there again. So it's a double waste of time if you're for it. Then when the system runs, the statements themselves, you can add controls to let you know if there's a group missing, which is quite handy because it will prevent you from further subdividing a group and actually not adding the items onto the statement. So that control totals are key. I'll demonstrate that when I demonstrate how you go about preparing a statement or a note in this software. Therefore this function can help clean this up and keep the area clean, and only spend time where you really need to spend time grouping your accounts. So I think that's basically it in terms of the structure and how you go about creating your accounts. Yeah, I mean, as highlighted here in red, this field must be unique. You can't have a duplicate. If there is a duplicate, it will let you know that there is a duplicate. I'll just demonstrate that as well. So for example, if I try to make this RV, for example, knowing that RV already exists, it'll give me a warning saying that you cannot use that, and it'll put it back to what it previously was. So the system pretty well protects that for you. You don't have to worry about that. And the grouping sort of automatically tends to link to the correct subgroups if you have used the filters and then you create it. So for example, if I have other expenses, for example, or the revenue rather, and I filter that and I want to put a few more categories, say for example, if I want to have printing separately, printing, and maybe if I want to have stationery. So as you can see, it's pretty easy to create these groups, and it links and it gives unique code to it. So you can have quite a detailed financials, and with changes in accounting standards, the regulators are requesting more and more detail be presented on the financial statements, and managing that is proving a challenge to a lot of organizations. So software like this would definitely help when it comes to preparing the best set of financials that you can prepare. I think that's it from me. My next video will be to try and cover up the actual classification of accounts into the groups and how you go about that. I hope you enjoyed this video.